The topic of discussion is free consent. According to Section 10 of Indian Contract Act, one of the essentials of a valid contract is free consent. Not only free consent is required, but before free consent, there has to be consents, that is consensus ad addendum. For a contract to be valid, the consent of the parties must be genuine. Free consent means a consent giving to an individual for the performance of an act on his own will. The principle of consensus ad addendum means that the parties entering into the contract must mean the same thing in the same sense. Consensus ad addendum means agreement, that means an agreement in Latin. And in contract, it means that there has been a meeting of the minds of all the parties involved. There should be unity of mind. If there is no consent, there will be no contract, and therefore it postulates unity of minds. The parties to the contract must have the same understanding in regards to the subject matter of the contract. This is the first principle, that the foundation of enforceable contracts, because for contracts to be enforceable, agreement or meeting of the minds of all the parties involved is required. So meeting of minds, also referred to as mutual agreement or mutual assent or consensus ad addendum. So meeting of minds is a phrase in a contract law used to describe the intentions of the parties forming the contract. In particular, it refers to the situation where there is a common understanding in the formation of the contract. In Indian Contract Act, the definition of consent is given in section 13, which states that it is when two or more persons agree upon the same thing and in the same sense they are to be consented. So the two people must agree to same thing in the same sense as well at the same time. Let us discuss the example. A agrees to sell his car to B. A owns three different cars and want to sell the Maruti. He wants to sell the Maruti car. B thinks he is buying his Tiago car. So here A and B have not agreed upon the same thing in the same sense. Means here there is a different subject matter in the mind of the party, and hence there is no consent, and subsequently there will be no contract between the parties. So mere consent is not enough for a contract to be enforceable. The consent given must be free and voluntary. Means only mere consent is not enough for enforceability of contract, but further it requires free consent also. The definition of free consent is provided under Indian Contract Act under section 14. Consent that is free from coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake is called as free consent. Means when it is not caused by all these elements, that is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake, it is a free consent. Free consent means the absence of any kind of coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake. When the consent which is given is affected by above these elements, that is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, mistake, when it is absence of any kind of the above element, such consent is said to be free consent when it is not affected by these elements. And in that case, the consent is free and voluntarily. For example, A agrees to sell his house to B. A owns 3 houses and wants to sell his house in Haridwar. B thinks he is buying his house which is at Delhi. So here A and B have not agreed upon the same thing in the same sense. Therefore, there is no consent and no contract afterwards. Another example, in case of Raffles versus Wichelhaus, two parties A and B enter into a contract for the sale of cotton belts by a ship named Peerless from Bombay. There were two ships with the same name and sailing. One is in October and another is in December. And while party A was thinking of one ship, while party B was thinking of other ship, the court held that there was no meeting of mind by both the party. Hence, the contract was invalid because there is an absence of meeting of mind or consent. The objective of this principle is to ensure that the decision of the parties while entering into the contract was not clouded or burdened. That is the main objective uh, of this principle, to ensure the decision of the parties while entering into the contract. So therefore, the consent given under coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake has the potential to invalidate the contract. So already we have discussed that section 13 defines consent as two or more persons are said to consent when they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. And according to section 14, consent is said to be free when it is not caused by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake. So let us discuss coercion. As stated above, consent given by party must be absent of coercion. According to section 15, coercion means committing or threatening to commit any act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code or which is unlawful, detaining or threatening to detaining any other person's property with a view to enter into an agreement. It is immaterial whether the IPC is or is not in force where the coercion is employed. So the threat amounting to coercion need not necessarily be from a party to contract. It may also proceed from a stranger to contract, or it may proceed from some third person also. For example, A went out for a walk. B approaches A with a stranger, pulls out his gun and asks A to give all his possessions. So the consent of A is obtained by coercion here. Coercion. The consent is said to be caused by coercion when obtained by number 1, committing or threatening to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code. Second, the unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property. So it is not important whether the IPC is or not in force where the coercion is taking place or where the coercion is applied. For example, A and B, both Indians, are on a voyage trip to America. When the ship is on the Atlantic Ocean, B threatens A that if he does not transfer his property to B's name, then he will push him into the water. Now, though the IPC is not in force on the Atlantic Ocean, it is still considered as coercion. Let us discuss some illustrative cases. Chikam Amni Raju versus Seshamma. In this case, a person threatened his wife and son that he would commit suicide if she doesn't transfer her property in his brother's favor. The wife and son executed the release of the deed under the threat. So it was held that the threat of suicide amounted to coercion within section 15 and the release of deed was therefore voidable. So this is also very important case to prove that threat to commit suicide amounts to coercion. Another example, Ranganayakama versus Alvar Sethi. A young widow girl of 13 years was forced to adopt a boy by her relatives who prevented the removal of his body for cremation, that is for burial, until she consented. Hell, the consent was not free but was induced by coercion. Consequently, the adoption was set aside. So, in case of coercion, the physical pressure is applied. Another case, Muthia versus Muthu Karuppa. An agent refused to hand over the account books of business to the new agent unless the principal released him from all liabilities. The principal had to give a release deed. Here, the deed was given under coercion and was voidable at the option of the principal. Another case law, Bansraj versus Secretary of State, the government gave a threat of attachment against the property of P for the recovery of the fine due from his son. P paid the fine. Hell, contract was induced by coercion. Consequences of coercion. According to section 19, when consent to an agreement is caused by coercion, the agreement is a contract voidable at the option of the party whose consent was so caused. In other words, either A, number one, aggrieved party can have the contract set aside, means he can avoid the contract. Or number two, he can refuses to perform it. And number three, take the defense of coercion if the other party sought to enforce the contract. Or B, he may, if he so desires, abide by the contract and insist on its performance by the other party. So as per section 64, if the aggrieved party opts to rescind a voidable contract, he must restore any benefit received by him under the contract to the other party from whom it received. Under English law, the term coercion is known as duress. The English common law doctrine relating to threat is duress. Duress involves actual or threatened violence over the person of another or his wife, parent or child with the view to obtaining his consent to the agreement. If the threat is with regard to goods or property of the other party, it is not duress. Thus, the Indian law is much wider than the English law, as the threat complaint of under former relates, that is under English law, relates to persons and property, whereas under latter it is confined to persons only. Sorry, under Indian law it covers person as well as property, but under English law it only confined to persons only. That means Indian law is much wider than the English law. The burden of proof in case of coercion lies on the party whose consent was coerced. When consent of a party was obtained through coercion, the contract becomes voidable at the option of the parties whose consent was so obtained. Thank you. In the next lecture, I will be discussing undue influence. Thank you.